Presidents past and present weigh in on Memorial Day, honoring the Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Over the weekend, President Biden also sent a warning to countries that violate human rights. The White House and Senate Republicans are still several $100 million apart on a deal to improve U.S. roads, bridges, and other projects. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is pushing ahead with a controversial election reform bill, H.R. 1, or For the People Act. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. It's Memorial Day, a day of reflection of those who came before and paid the ultimate sacrifice. Veterans weighed in, telling the Epoch Times it's not about us. It's about the men on that wall out there. A lot of people don't realize that. The wall refers to a granite monument, which stands guard at the front door of VFW. It bears the names of a group of men known as the Brooksville 8, men who were killed in action during the Vietnam War. Memorial Day is about those who died and were unable to take off their uniform. Senator Tom Cotton wrote, "Although Memorial Day is naturally somber, we should also view this day with pride." Cotton honors those who paid with their lives, writing about the Arlington Cemetery, saying the simple white headstones that mark military graves at Arlington National Cemetery cannot fully convey each warrior's story and devotion to duty. But beneath them are men and women whose love for country was so great that they were willing to forsake all future happiness in this world for America, and many did. Their sacrifices make those gardens of stone our nation's most sacred shrine. Abraham Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He noted that the fallen soldiers gave the last full measure of devotion and called on Americans to highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Vice President Kamala Harris facing backlash for tweeting out, "Enjoy the long weekend." She did post a tweet the next day, writing, "Throughout our history, our servicemen and women have risked everything to defend our freedoms and our country. As we prepare to honor them on Memorial Day, we remember their service and their sacrifice." And over the weekend, President Biden honored those who made the ultimate sacrifice. At his Memorial Day speech in Delaware Sunday, he spoke about the pain of losing a son or daughter, saying, "I know how much the loss hurts. I know the black hole it leaves in the middle of your chest. Well, I know nothing I could say to ease the pain. I just know that each year it gets a little bit easier." Biden's son, Beau Biden, was a veteran. He died 6 years ago from brain cancer. But Biden also issued a warning to the leaders of China and Russia, saying human rights abuses will not be tolerated. Biden said he already spoke to China's leader about human rights violations, and he'll bring it up with Russia's president too. He says we will not stand by and let him abuse those rights. The two are expected to meet on June 16th in Geneva. A Human Rights Watch report in 2020 on Russia found several breaches on human rights. They note the human rights situation continued to deteriorate in 2019, citing torture, degrading treatment, crackdown on election protest, and lack of freedom of expression. They also note the continued persecution on religious freedom and the crackdown on human rights defenders and environmental defenders. Now let's turn to disputes on Capitol Hill. The infrastructure plan still in the midst of a tug-of-war. Senate Republicans and the Biden administration still hundreds of millions of dollars apart. But the plan is inching forward despite those disagreements. Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito told Fox News on Sunday, "I think we can get to real compromise, absolutely, because we are both still in the game." Capito leads a group of 6 Senate Republicans who have been in regular contact with the White House. Her side last week proposed $928 billion to improve roads, bridges, and other traditional infrastructure projects. Much of the funding would come from relocating money meant for other programs. The Biden administration's latest offer in negotiations is $1.7 trillion and would include projects such as home care for the elderly. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg described negotiations on ABC's This Week, saying there's movement in the right direction, but a lot of concern. One of the many sticking points, the White House wants to offset the cost of the plan with new taxes on the wealthy and corporations. When asked about rolling back some of the tax cuts enacted during the Trump administration, Capito said, "I am not going to vote to overturn those." She also held the line against funding for projects that go beyond physical infrastructure. The talks were expected to continue this week, even though Congress is on break, with the Senate returning on June 7th. And as for the massive election reform bill, H.R. 1, or For the People Act, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is pushing ahead. He told Democrat colleagues in a memo that they will vote on the bill next month at the end of June. The bill passed the Democrat-controlled House in March and is now awaiting action in the Senate. A quick refresher, what is H.R. 1? The nearly 800-page election reform package seeks to impose countrywide requirements on voting procedures, such as mandating automatic voter registration and making it legal for mail-in voting across the whole country without the need to provide photo ID to get an absentee ballot. The 800 pages can be distilled down to three main points: voting rights, campaign finance, and ethics. Democrats tout it as pro-democratic and anti-corruption and have dubbed it For the People Act. Schumer calls it legislation that is essential to defending our democracy, reducing the influence of dark money and powerful special interests, and stopping the wave of Republican voter suppression happening in states across the country. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy countered by calling it For the Politicians Act. And in April, Republican Senator Ted Cruz called the bill a corrupt politician act and vowed to stop it. Speaking at an online event, Senator Ted Cruz attacked the Democratic-backed voting reform bill, saying at the time, this bill is not designed in any way to shape reform to reduce voter fraud. In fact, it is designed explicitly to increase voter fraud. It's also not designed to increase participation in any manner inconsistent with the law. What it designs to do is to take away your right to vote. He says the bill puts federal government in charge of elections and repeals most state integrity laws. He says it mandates ballot harvesting and allows millions of illegal aliens to vote, saying it's a corrupt attempt to seize the power of federal government for the next century. So I believe stopping it is an absolute extension goal if we want to maintain free and democratic election in our country. Democrats, on the other hand, largely support the legislation. Senator Amy Klobuchar told a Senate Rules Committee hearing on May 11th, "The freedom to vote is fundamental to all of our freedoms. It is how Americans control their government and hold their elected officials accountable." She went on to say, "The For the People Act is about setting basic national standards to make sure all Americans can vote safely in the way that works best for them, regardless of what state or zip code they live in. The For the People Act is about reducing the power of big money in our elections by ending secret spending by billionaires and special interests. And the For the People Act is about making anti-corruption reforms to ensure all politicians work for the people, not for themselves." Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell also hinted at H.R. 1. He said previously Washington Democrats want to pass a sweeping bill that would let them rewrite all 50 states' election laws and turn the Federal Election Commission into a Democrat-run partisan body, adding this power grab is impossible to defend, so the left wants to deflect. Instead of winning the debate, they want to silence debate by bullying citizens and entire states into submission. The legislative push he's likely referring to is H.R. 1. McConnell's comments came in a lengthy statement issued to businesses siding with Major League Baseball against Georgia's voting reforms. Over 200 businesses issued a joint statement signaling their opposition to election reform bills, but it didn't specify which bill or which state. McConnell issued a statement in response, telling businesses standing with the league not to use economic blackmail to spread disinformation. McConnell argues the opposition to SB 202, the election reform bill that was passed in Georgia, was a way to build support for Democrat-led efforts to reform election law, citing data that over 70% of Americans, including majority of Democrats, support voter ID requirements. So with the current upheaval around requiring photo ID at elections, where do Americans stand on the issue? A recent poll found more than half, nearly 3/4 of Americans agree that voters should show photo identification before being allowed to vote. The Associated Press poll found 72% of Americans participating in the survey are in favor of requiring photo ID to vote, 13% against, and 14% neither supported or opposed it. The survey ran from March 26 to 29th. Over 1,100 people participated. And among those surveyed, most Republicans supported requiring photo ID at 91%. Out of the Democrats, 56% were for it. And among independents, 72%. Another popular consensus was automatic voter registration when they get a driver's license or other state-issued ID. The poll found 60% across the board were for it. Majority of Democrats were for it at 76%, while less than half of Republicans showed support at 47%. And as for same-day registration, still a majority across the board showed support at 53%. But among Democrats and Republicans, it was the most divisive issue yet. 69% of Democrats said they supported same-day registration, but only 38% of Republicans did. Both automatic voter registration and same-day voter registration are part of H.R. 1. While it passed in the Democrat-controlled House in March, its fate in the Senate is uncertain, as it needs at least 60 supporting votes in the evenly split upper chamber to bypass a filibuster. President Joe Biden has said he would sign the bill into law if it reaches his desk. Schumer also plans to bring other pieces of legislation up for a vote, including the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would direct the Department of Labor to study pay disparities between men and women and make information on the disparities available to the public. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.